on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murderers is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey Dylan.
What's up?
It's been so long.
It has been so long since I seen you 5 minutes ago.
Exactly. Well, let's give a quick shout out to brand new patrons, Dylan. We have Clarissa and Stephanie, who so generously decided to support the show.
Thank you.
This episode is for you. And all month long, we have been taking suggestions from our patrons on cases we should cover. So today's case was offered up by someone, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yes, and it's a great story, and I must say our patrons have suggested some great cases.
And this is one that I'm surprised is not more mainstream.
Yeah, it's true. Once you hear the story, if you haven't heard it before, you're going to wonder why in the world you haven't heard it before. Does that make sense?
Yes, Dylan.
Okay.
It sure does. And I certainly want to give a big thanks to everyone who donated to our flood relief. We set up a GoFundMe. Our local area here in Western North Carolina experienced some devastating floods, especially in our home county. $300 million estimated damages, Dylan.
Yeah, and that's just simply in property and houses and such. Certainly not including loss of life.
4 people passed away during the storms. It was really sad. It's amazing to see how our community has rallied together and are in recovery mode. So it's going to be a long road to get things back where they were, but it's just really wonderful to know that we have listeners out there who care and generously donated to the GoFundMe. We've already been able to disperse some of those funds to a local organization. As more of those funds are made available through GoFundMe, we plan to make some more donations, Dylan.
Yes, I must say, with me and Heather both, it was a time of crisis, honestly, because it just happened fast and it devastated the entire county. And she was just like, look, we should just put out a call to our listeners because I know they will react because they care and they're great people. And it's true, they did. And our heart goes out to you and everyone else who's recovering.
Yeah, I just felt like we needed to jump into action, Dylan, and do what we could, maybe on our end. So everyone who donated, thank you so much. And we had a lot of folks send good vibes, thoughts and prayers, and we appreciate that as well.
People was checking on me, making sure I was all right.
Yeah, because your employer experienced some of the flooding.
Yeah, it's true. It happened right there in Canton, North Carolina, where I work in a mill in the middle of town. And I must say, on a personal note, besides all the tragedy, that really touched me. That people from all over the country and world really reached out and was like, I know Dylan works there at that paper mill, and is he okay? And I just want to say thank you.
People love you, Dylan.
I love them.
You're very popular.
I love them.
You make the podcast.
That's not true.
You make the podcast and you derail it in such a way that we get those 1-star reviews where people say, trash.
Trash.
Which, by the way, I like being trash, okay? It's my aesthetic. I embrace it.
I've wore the trash badge of honor most of my life.
I might have just been born plain white trash, but fancy wasn't my name. You can't bring me down.
That's right. Get your dress ready, girl.
Yeah, I got a roach crawling across the toe of my high heel shoe right now.
You got to earn money.
Are you ready to get into today's case, Dylan?
I am.
Okay, this is a good one, and it is not too far away from us. We're going to be sticking to what we know, North Carolina. Come on and raise up. Take your shirt off.
Are you? Oh, Petey Pablo?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Okay. Henry Louis Wallace was born November 4th, 1965, to mother Lottie Mae Wallace in Barnwell, South Carolina. The family was dirt poor. Lottie Mae had an affair with a married school teacher who returned to his wife after Henry's conception. Lottie Mae had grown up under tough circumstances. Her mother died young, and her father abandoned the family when she was just a baby. So already, mom's got trauma in her past, and we all know that can carry on, into future generations, right?
Generational trauma. It's real.
Now, Henry had an older sister named Yvonne. She was 3 years older, and the family lived in squalor, essentially a ramshackle house that had no indoor plumbing or electricity. The children drank water from a pump well and used chamber pots instead of a toilet.
And this is in the 1960s?
This is in the 60s. I think there were still folks in the 60s who maybe didn't have the indoor plumbing and the electricity. There was a lot of that, I think, still in, Appalachia. But for the most part, this was something that folks had in their home by this point.
Well, indoor plumbing revolutionized all of society, no matter whenever it happened. And, I think there's very few people left at that point who are literally using chamber pots. That's an old technology from, the medieval times.
Lottie Mae shared the home with her grandmother, and the pair didn't get along at all. They fought constantly, as the matriarch was a strict disciplinarian. Lottie Mae often used physical punishments, as well as verbal and emotional abuse. Lottie Mae was the sole provider of the household, working long hours in a textile mill. Young Henry was expected to grow up fast. Any infraction would result in spankings and whippings. Lottie Mae would make Henry and Yvonne pick their own switches and hickories.
Well, I've been through that before.
Same. Actually, I told you this before, but my great-grandmother, my mama, she was mean. She was a real hateful lady. She had like a collection of switches that she kept on top of her refrigerator.
Well, she had like trophy switches.
She was just waiting for you to fuck up so she could wear your little ass out.
So your great-grandmother, is that what you said?
Yeah, one time she chased me around the house with a hairbrush, too.
Oh, so she's basically like, I wish a motherfucker would.
She was a mean woman. Her husband was like pure as gold. Like the most awesome person you'd ever meet. But she was mean as hell. I don't know how they stayed together for so long.
Well, I bet you mind your P's and Q's when you was around her.
Sometimes, if Lottie was too tired, she would force the brother and sister to hit each other with the switches.
Well, could you imagine? Like, if you're going to get a spanking from mom or dad, whoever's around, that's bad enough. But if you were made to administer that punishment to your sibling, I don't know how that would work. That seems very traumatic.
Well, as an adult, Henry would reveal this caused him great mental anguish, as he loved his sister Yvonne, and he didn't want to hurt her. Because the family was poor, Henry often had to wear his sister's old clothes. His daily chores consisted of emptying the family's chamber pots, and there was no room for argument. At school, Henry recognized his situation was different from other kids. His friends had fathers in the picture who played baseball or helped with homework after school. Henry had no information about his biological father, and when he asked, it was usually met with an angry response. Lottie Mae did not want to talk about it.
Man, could you imagine if you had to wear your sister's clothes? Some of it's going to be kind of unisex, and maybe people won't know, but I got to imagine some of it was like effeminate. For lack of a better word.
Well, I've heard other cases of this. Like, I remember listening to a podcast about Charles Manson and how his family, his mother, they were very poor, and that he had to wear girls' clothes sometimes. And it was like a very traumatic situation for him.
Well, in this day and age, it may seem less like a big deal because everything's, quite different and maybe more gender fluid and, unisex things.
Well, androgyny is like hip.
Right. But back in the day, that's not the case at all. This is certain to bring the ire upon you of bullies, maybe make people who were your friends not be your friends anymore. So this would be a big deal back then.
Definitely.
Right.
Longing for a father, Henry was blown away when one day out of the blue, a man telephoned. He introduced himself as Henry's father. The boy was over the moon. The man promised Henry he would come the following day so the pair could meet. Henry was so excited, he skipped school and waited eagerly for his father to arrive. But the man never showed up. This deeply wounded Henry.
So he can't get any answers out of his mom. He's trying to get information about his father. And then out of the blue, he gets an opportunity to meet this man who I guess at this point he probably figures he'd never see or hear from. And then to only be let down again.
Yeah. Henry attended Barnwell High School, where he was a popular student. Academics were not his strong suit, but he was outgoing, friendly, and obedient. Lottie Mae wouldn't allow her 6-foot-tall son to play football, so he went out for cheerleading. Surprisingly, students didn't bully him over this choice. People loved Henry. He was dynamic and enthusiastic. All the cheerleaders loved him because he was polite and upbeat. After high school, he tried his hand at college but flunked out of 2 schools. He worked part-time as a radio DJ at WBAW in Barnwell. He called himself the Night Rider.
Ooh.
He had a decent voice and a pleasant personality, joked often on the air. He actually molded his radio personality out of one of his heroes, Wolfman Jack.
Oh, and I think Wolfman Jack is one of the classic DJs of this era.
The gig was great until Henry got caught stealing music from the station. So at this time, I'm imagining it was probably like cassette tapes, records.
Maybe vinyl, yeah.
Without a college degree, no drive to attend college, and nothing going on but the rent, Henry decided enlisting in the U.S. Navy was the best option. He excelled in the military. He picked up rank very quickly, was just doing really well. He was always willing to follow orders, do the job right. He stayed in the military for 8 years and earned praise on his evaluations. Henry had an on-again, off-again relationship since high school with a girl named Meretta. While in the Navy, he married Meretta. She had a young daughter that was not Henry's biological child, but he embraced the little girl with loving arms. The pair moved to the West Coast, then back east again. The marriage wouldn't last, though. Henry adopted Tiandra, Meretta's child. However, his wife refused to have any more children, and their sex life suffered. Meretta had been sexually assaulted as a teenager, and Henry often blamed this incident on her disinterest in having sex with him.
Well, for one, I will say, loving a child that's not biologically yours is I guess a lot of people think that's noble or a very good thing to do. And I just think if you love kids, right, and how can you be around a little baby or kid and not love them and take care of them? But then, I mean, I could see that putting a strain on their relationship. But if we can't have any other kids, and then our sex life suffers, so that'd be a really tough thing to deal with.
Henry suggested that his wife get some counseling, but she refused, and this caused more friction in the marriage. During his time in the Navy, he began using drugs, specifically crack cocaine.
Crack
Yeah,
is a hell of a drug.
crack is whack.
Crack is whack. But crack can be fun, but it's dangerous.
Damn it, Dylan.
That's what they say.
In Washington, they were stationed in Washington State. He was served warrants for several burglaries in and around the Seattle metro area. In January of 1988, Henry was arrested for breaking into a hardware store. That June, he pled guilty to second-degree burglary. A judge sentenced him to 2 years of supervised probation, and according to the probation officer, Henry didn't show up for most of the mandatory meetings. The Navy caught wind of this breaking and entering charge and conviction, so he ended up being honorably discharged. Because he had no problems before this, the military allowed him to leave quietly without impacting his discharge status. Once he was a civilian, Meretta left him. So with nowhere to go, no job, Henry had to move in with his mother and sister once again.
So this was a huge event in Henry's life. This, unfortunately, he got into drugs, got in trouble, ruined his career, right? The military's a career. and you put all this time and effort
Well,
in,
8 years.
and he was good at it.
Is about halfway to retirement.
Yeah, no
You
doubt.
can retire in 20 years.
And
so.
he was good at it, and it sounds like he enjoyed it and was moving up the ranks. And there's no telling where he could have went. But this has basically ruined his life for the moment. And then he gets discharged, lucky to get an honorable discharge. I think that speaks to the fact he was a good sailor up to that point. And then his wife leaves him because now he has no career.
It's a lot at once.
It is a lot at once. It's a lot of turmoil for a person to deal with at once, let alone with someone who's already had a substance issue.
Around the end of 1989 or 1990, Henry was introduced to an 18-year-old high school senior named Tashonda Bethia. Tashonda was bright, beautiful, and caught Henry's eye. He was introduced to the young lady by his mother, who was good friends with Tashonda's mother. They actually worked together at the same factory. Henry pursued the young woman, hoping to date her. In March of 1990, Tashonda went missing. Several weeks later, in April of 1990, two fishermen found her body in a lake. The young woman had been raped, then manually strangled. Her wrists slashed after she was dead.
Jesus.
Yeah, very, very bad. On April 2nd, Henry was arrested in a motel room with a 16-year-old girl. He was holding her at gunpoint. Now, at this time, he was charged with second-degree sexual conduct and questioned in the murder of Tashonda. Without enough evidence, Wallace was never formally charged in the girl's murder, but would later confess to it. It seems the attempted rape charges didn't go anywhere. He was once again out in the streets, free to prey on women. By 1990, as I mentioned, the marriage was crumbling, and Henry found himself in trouble. The Wallaces were now living in Charlotte, North Carolina. As a teenager, Henry had used drugs to mask the pain inside. Now that Moretta was gone, he was pining for her badly. He turned to drugs once again, including the crack cocaine. He dated other women, but no serious relationships came from it. In February of 1991, Wallace broke into his former high school and the radio station where he had once worked. He stole audio-visual equipment with plans to pawn the items. Now, despite casual relationships, he did have a daughter with a girlfriend. Born in September of 1993, his daughter Kendra was the only joy he had ever truly known in life. Because it seems like he really did love kids, and he wanted to have a child of his own.
Yeah, and unfortunately, for him, his substance abuse issues, it seems like he's one of those types of addicts. Okay, full disclosure, I've done drugs in my life, but I've never went full tilt with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I've never lost everything I've had, my job, my family, house, and
because you've been and you are a functioning addict.
well, yeah, and yeah, that's true. And then you resort to things like thievery, or selling yourself. And I mean, not to gender assign, is that a thing? But it seems like men typically steal, and women typically, unfortunately, sadly, sell their body. Yeah, it's like they got that debit card, right?
Okay.
I'm just kidding. But anyway, I'm saying it's really sad when you see people go this all into their substance abuse. It's all can be destructive and harmful, but some people just don't give a damn. And for this guy to, it's already affected his career in the military, and along with that, his wife, his family. And so then he just doesn't give. It sounds like he's one of those addicts that goes 100%.
All or nothing.
All or nothing. Will look you in the face, then steal from you even after you help them. That type of things. And I always think that's very, very sad to see someone that far down the tubes, if you will.
In Charlotte, Henry worked a series of jobs in retail and fast food like Taco Bell, but couldn't hold down any particular job for very long. He didn't care about work or success or doing a good job. He was drowning in darkness. On February 21st, 1992, a woman named Keeber Lewis was offered a ride to the Rock Hill Lounge. Rock Hill is in South Carolina, not far from Charlotte. It's basically across the state line, just south of Charlotte. You can be there in just a few minutes.
Yeah, it's not far at all.
She knew Wallace, though I'm not sure the details of that relationship. It said in reports that they knew each other through a mutual friend. Lewis was a Greenville, South Carolina native and had moved to Rock Hill to live in a home for troubled girls. She was sent there by the South Carolina Youth Services after a shoplifting arrest. Keeber stayed in Rock Hill after having a baby. When Henry picked her up, she didn't know his name but recognized his face. Instead of driving her to the club, he was going someplace else. Keeber Lewis, I know I've called her Keeber and Lewis, she tried to jump out of his car. She knew something wasn't right.
So her spidey senses were going off.
He's going in the opposite direction of
Right.
where I said I wanted to go. I don't know him well. Yeah.
And this, at some point, it's like she's getting a creeper vibe, or this isn't right. So she chanced personal harm, physical injury, just to get away from him.
Right. When she did, he pulled a gun on her. He then drove her to a neighborhood in a wooded area known as Country Downs. There, Wallace forced her to perform oral sex and then raped her. When he finished, Wallace mocked the woman, showing her the gun she believed to be a .45 and said it was actually a BB gun. He then told her to drive the car. Keeber said that she was like driving very erratically, kind of hoping that police would notice and pull her over so she could get away from him. Because at that point, she didn't know what he was going to do.
She's desperate.
When she arrived at a friend's house, she took down Henry's license plate number and turned it over to police. He was arrested February 25th, but released on his own recognizance. So you're telling me you can kidnap a woman and rape her, and they're going to let you go in South Carolina?
Well, you know my theories on harm to women and children, and we'll talk about that some other time. But it seems, how many stories have we done? How many chances have investigators around the country, around the world, had to stop these people? And I'm seriously believe that, like, you got to take that serious every single time and make sure and start it like, I think this guy might have done this, until you disprove it to yourself with the evidence. But I mean, I don't know if it's misogyny. I don't know if there's some kind of system in place that thrives off of harm to women and children, but it really truly blows my mind. And being a student of true crime, how often these people, molesters, rapists, get out over and over and over. I mean, okay, so I've gotten in mild trouble in my life. And I certainly wasn't released to my own recognizance. And it wasn't molestation or certainly rape or kidnapping. I mean, how the fuck does that even happen? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the fact that she was brave enough to come forward immediately after with her story, because so many victims don't. You've got her coming forward. She's likely terrified. Her story is believable. She's telling you, he kidnapped me, he raped me. I'm sure if a rape kit was conducted, they would see his sperm, his DNA, right? And then they're just going to let the fucker go? Yeah, this is infuriating.
He already had other incidents. So, I mean, what the hell?
Word spread around Rock Hill that Henry was looking for Keeber Lewis. He said he was going to kill her. Fearing for her life, she fled back to Greenville to stay with family, leaving her then 3-year-old son with his father's mother in Rock Hill. In May of 1992, Wallace picked up a convicted drug dealer and a prostitute named Sharon Nance. The single mother of a son was found dead May 27th of 1992. Nance had demanded payment for her services, and Henry refused to pay. He bludgeoned her to death with a rock and left her body beside Roselle's Ferry Road in Charlotte. She's the only victim that he didn't know personally, which we will get into.
Yeah. Oh, if you're infuriated now, you're going to be losing your mind by the end of this story, honestly.
Sharon's family disputed the reports that she was a sex worker. In an interview with the Charlotte Observer, her Aunt Linda admitted the woman had been in and out of trouble over the years, but said, quote, even if she was, meaning a sex worker, that was no reason to kill her. I can't see why anybody would want to kill her. She was so gentle. If she had anything, she would give it to you. Everybody liked her.
Yeah. Being a sex worker, or being a drug addict for that matter, is not a death sentence. It doesn't make you a perpetual liar. It doesn't make you completely untrustworthy on all things you ever say to anyone else. That stigma that is used in the courtrooms constantly throughout history just really infuriates me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
because it's time and again, you're like, oh, well, she's a sex worker. Like, you're supposed to be like, oh, like she's subhuman now? Just because she decides, honestly, all she's doing is deciding to make her money this way. It's her body. Like it or don't, that's fine. She's deciding to get by and make money this way. Or him. Men do it too. It does not make them subhuman. And I cannot stand people that look down upon others. I really can't.
Well, and if we didn't have these puritanical, self-righteous lawmakers, keeping it illegal and making it an offense where you can go to jail, these women could be off the streets, working in legitimate brothels and that type of place, paying taxes and being protected.
Let's be honest. They
But
could be.
I'm sure that's a story for another time. We can get
They could
into
be
that.
CEOs. Because the wars have been started over women, right?
Have they?
Helen of Troy.
She had that wop.
I would kill people over you
Oh,
And
no,
it's
you wouldn't.
because of that wop.
You're so lazy.
And your
I
brain.
just don't believe it.
It's true.
I was
No,
gonna say you love my big brain.
you. I hope you never see the fact how evil I can be if someone threatened you.
You're such a big, gentle bear. I don't believe it.
Oh, you know what?
Like a little Care Bear.
Gentle bears bite.
It's like I'm ready for the Care Bear countdown right now.
You
5,
think-
4, 3, 2, 1, and like a little rainbow just like starts radiating from your chest.
Wait, is the symbol on my chest going to be a tall boy?
Yeah.
God, that's beautiful.
So it's just radiating like cigarette smoke out of your chest.
Yes.
Anyway. All right. Derailed Dylan. Back to the story. 7 months after Sharon's body was found, her mother, Bertha Nance, died from a stroke at age 50. Her family says the woman literally worried herself to death about who had killed her daughter.
That's it. I don't know what to say. That's so sad.
It is really sad. When I read that, I teared up.
Like people that knew her knew she basically wasted away after what happened to her daughter. She never could find any more joy. Her health declined, I'm going to assume. And you see this. You'll see it when an elderly couple, one or the other dies, and then the one that's left follows not long after, within months or weeks.
My best friend that's listening, and Julie, her great uncle passed away, and the day of his funeral, his wife had a heart attack and died.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
I felt so terrible for the family, especially for their son. Loses his father, and then a couple days later, mom dies.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's just out of pure mourning, just because you can't. It's like you can't go on without that person in your life.
Well, that's how I feel about you.
Baby, I feel that way about you as well.
Oh, I love you.
It's true.
Okay, we're grossing people out. On June 15th of 1992, Caroline Love was working at Bojangles, or the Bojangles. I like to call it Bojangles.
Oh my God, I was like, damn, I want to go eat down at Bojangles.
At
It's Bojangles, guys.
At Bojangles on Central Avenue in Charlotte. You know what? I love Bojangles Cajun chicken biscuit.
Hey, I don't care what you say. Bojangles is all right. There really is. The chicken, the dirty rice,
It slaps.
them biscuits.
Man, that dirty rice is good. You know I like my rice dirty. You know what's really funny? Dylan and I think it was like our 3rd date or something. He took me to the cookout,
It's true.
and we got fucked up. We were crunk.
We got turned.
We got turned. And afterwards, I begged you to take me to Bojangles because I really wanted some fried chicken.
Well, yeah.
And we sat in the parking lot eating fried chicken drunk. And that's how I knew you were the one for me.
Baby, I love you too. You know, one time I pulled up to a Bojangles, you know what I ordered? The nasty rice. And they was like, what? No, this is a real story. And I wasn't drinking. I was totally sober as a judge.
The nasty rice.
I was like, let me get that nasty rice on the side. And they was like, what? And I was like, you ain't got the nasty rice? And they was like, we got dirty rice. I was like, I guess that'll have to do. It's a true story.
I love that.
They probably spit on my chicken.
The nasty man, I love fried chicken. Okay, well, the young woman asked her boss if she could trade $10 in for quarters because she had planned to do some laundry when she got home from work. Caroline's cousin, Robert Ross, picked her up and dropped her off at her apartment building. He watched the woman enter the foyer of the building safely. Henry had been dating Caroline's roommate, a woman named Sadie McKnight. Henry had stolen a key from Sadie, planning to enter the apartment when he knew Love would be there alone. That evening, she walked into the apartment while Wallace waited in the bathroom. When he announced his presence, he tried to kiss her. She sort of pushed away from him, and he told her he wanted to have sex with her. She resisted, and that's when he put her into a wrestling hold. He kept the woman in this hold until she passed out. So I'm imagining it's like a sleeper hold, right?
Who expects that this is going to work out for you? So I'm going to assume his intentions the whole time was do whatever I want no matter what. Right? He leads with like you're just going to be like, hey, I'm in your apartment. And like people's going to be cool with that.
He's like, I'll make love to you like you want me to.
Yeah, boys to men
and
up
I'll
this
hold
bitch.
you tight. I mean, I'm just wondering how many times that's worked. That
Never.
you just like hit on your girlfriend's roommate and she just fawns and swoons.
I'm going to guess seldom.
I would say most women would be like, the fuck out of my face, bro.
This guy's full of violence, and it's really scary how he doesn't mind just to unleash it on these unsuspecting people. And he typically is people that know who he is, people in his own circle.
There's something really sinister. We've talked about this offline, Dylan, in our private life. There is something very sinister about a peeping Tom.
And stalkers.
Or like a man who creeps around. Like a
Yes.
stalker. The thought of someone waiting for you like your prey
Exactly.
in a bathroom for hours until you get home, that is fucking scary.
Yeah, it certainly. We talked about this again just a couple of days ago because I said to you, literally, stalkers and peeping toms are a different level of scariness and depravity that is in a category all its own.
Yeah, it's like sick.
It's very disgusting and sick, and it's really scary that someone would put, because they put a lot of fucking effort into doing these things, right? Like you said, like waiting for maybe possibly an hour or 2 or 3 or whatever, or going through all this time to figure out your patterns or your schedule just so they can have these brief moments of catching you unawares and like catching a glimpse. Or just seeing you go in a friend's house or come out of work and you have no idea they're there or that they're following you like that. That's truly, I mean, honestly, if I think about that, even personally as a man, a good sized man, a really big man, if you will, that's scary. I mean, seriously, it's like if I found out someone, male or female, was like stalking me to that degree, I would be, I don't know, it's very unsettling.
It is very unnerving. He's got her in the sleeper hold until she passes out. He then moves her to her bedroom and takes off her clothes. Henry rapes Caroline while he's still sort of applying this chokehold kind of move on her. She's kind of in and out of consciousness, but she starts to fight him. That's when Henry grabs a curling iron near her bed and places the cord around Caroline's neck. Begins choking her. He makes like a garrote.
Right. So he's got the cord. He's pulling it in opposite directions around her neck. Very, yeah.
And that
horrible.
is going to be his move, is making these garrote style.
These improvised garrotes, if
Yes.
you will. Okay.
Yes. After she dies, Henry folds the body up in her bedding, her bed sheets, stuffs the bundle into a large orange trash bag. He described it as like the type of trash bags that state work crews use.
So it's like contractor grade, a really big 30, 40-gallon trash bag.
Henry carried the body to his car, placing it in the trunk. He then returned to the apartment and saw her roll of quarters lying on the dresser, the ones that she had planned to do laundry with. He steals them.
What a dick.
Like, what a fucking asshole. By then, it's dark, so he drove the body to Stevenson Road in Charlotte, where there was some construction set up. He found a spot away from the road where he thought she wouldn't be found. Henry would later say that he went back 2 days later and decomposition had already set in. He described seeing Caroline's body and it appeared like leather. He described her body as looking like E.T.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, you could imagine a body in a heavy plastic bag in any type of heat or humidity. Yeah, that's going to accelerate the process. And the fact that he went back to look is just another level of depravity on his part. I mean, why would you do that?
Sick.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
He returned about a week later, and she was only bones.
So he was right in his assessment that he stashed this bag in an area where it wouldn't be immediately found. But now it's like he's got this curiosity or something about, well, I wonder what it looks like now. So he's constantly thinking about this poor woman that he raped and murdered. And, it just keeps returning to the scene of her body.
It was Caroline's sister, Kathy, who filed the missing persons report at the police station. The manager at Bojangles had phoned Kathy concerned about Caroline's absence, as it was unlike the woman to no call, no show. Kathy asked Sadie, the roommate, if she had heard from Caroline. Sadie said the apartment seemed in order, but it was highly unusual for Caroline to be out of communication for this long. The woman typically checked in even if she was staying with friends, so the longest that Sadie and Caroline, as roommates, would go without speaking would be like 8 hours, like a work shift.
Right.
However, investigators thought the apartment looked like a scuffle had taken place. So this makes me assume that maybe Sadie didn't go in Caroline's room to check. She just thought, well, the rest of the apartment looks okay.
Well, and that's possible. Or maybe she just did not being that suspicious about the situation, maybe just did a quick walkthrough. You know, typically you walk in you're not going to look in the closet. You're not going to look, in people's bedroom. A lot of people don't go in other people's bedrooms.
When you have a roommate, there's a sense of privacy there.
Right.
You don't really want to go poking around your roommate's room, right? I mean, that's their space. So I can understand where maybe she didn't recognize that something had gone on. Police find that the furniture had a slight appearance of having been rearranged as though it was moved during a fight. The sheets were removed from the bed, and there was no sign of them in the laundry basket. The hamper was full, and police had learned from her manager that Caroline had asked for that roll of quarters. She hadn't done laundry, and the roll of quarters was missing. Charlotte police continued searching for Caroline, but every lead seemed a dead end. They were getting nowhere. It wasn't until March of 1994 that Caroline's body was finally located. Throughout this period, Henry was employed, as I mentioned, at various fast food joints around Charlotte, including Captain D's Seafood, the Black Eyed Pea, Golden Corral, and Taco Bell. In the fleeting world of fast food, most people didn't stay long enough to make friends. New employees were being brought in constantly, and the revolving door meant that many of the young women who would become victims didn't know about the others. Because it's just constant hiring, people leave, people quit, new people coming on board.
So they weren't around when so-and-so went missing and was never seen again.
Yeah, and didn't even know about it.
And then people, after the event happens and it kind of settles down after a couple months, it's not something they bring up in normal conversation.
Many of the restaurants where Henry was employed were within walking distance to a townhouse he shared with his girlfriend on Sharon Amity Road. Many of his victims worked at the same Bojangles as Caroline Love. 8 months after Caroline's murder on February 19th of 1993, Dee Sumter came home from work preparing to make dinner for herself and her teenage daughter, Shauna Hawk. Shauna was a college student at Piedmont Central Community College, a beautiful young woman. Shauna lived with Dee in a 2-story apartment on Elon Avenue after her parents' divorce. Dee was a receptionist at a Charlotte law firm. Her daughter attended college during the day, studying to be a paralegal, then worked part-time at Taco Bell to help pay for her tuition. Nicknamed the Purple Princess because it was her favorite color, Shauna was by all accounts a really good young woman. As Dee began settling in, she was growing concerned when Shauna wasn't answering her calls throughout the house. Like, she knew Shauna should be home by now. She noticed her daughter's coat and purse laying in the dining room. Earlier in the day, she had seen her daughter wearing the coat because it was around 40 degrees outside. It was a cold winter's evening with dropping temperatures, so Shauna would have definitely taken her coat with her had she gone somewhere. Shauna wouldn't just leave it laying around, Dee thought. Concerned, she called Daryl Kirkpatrick, who was Shauna's boyfriend, asking, is my daughter with you? Daryl said he hadn't seen Shauna all day, but he would be right over. When he arrived, Dee phoned the police to report her daughter missing. Daryl began a cursory search of the apartment. When he walked in the downstairs bathroom, the shower curtain was outside the tub and the floor was damp. Something about this seemed peculiar, so he pulled back the curtain. Inside was Shauna's nude body curled up, submerged partially underwater.
My God, he found his girlfriend in that state?
Shauna was pronounced dead at the hospital. The medical examiner found lacerations and bruising on her skull, but determined the woman's manner of death had been strangulation. Some type of cord or band had been used to circle her neck, killing her. Shauna's death was ruled a homicide. Police interviewed a number of coworkers, friends, classmates, but didn't seem to find any motive or suspect. At that time, only about 3% of all homicides in the state of North Carolina were strangulation. So this was definitely out of the ordinary. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, and the crime scene seemed as though the killer or killers had gone out of their way to leave no evidence behind.
Yes, it's interesting from a true crime aspect. He started out, it seems to be sexually driven the entire time from every encounter, and then manual strangulation seemed to be, he tried that first. And it's weird to me, like, these people are killing people, for one. It's very strange and sick. And then it's almost like they try these different techniques until they find the one that really, like, if it's sexually motivated, that, like, really gets their rocks off, right? I mean, there's some kind of satisfaction in this. So he found his in strangulation by ligature. So once he tried it one time, it seems that that's the thing he wants to go with now. And I don't know. There's something about strangulation. I think because it's drawn out and it takes some minutes that I find really scary and
It's brutal.
unsettling.
It's brutal and heinous and very intimate.
Well, strangulation is in that category for me. Stabbing someone 30, 40 fucking times, like 20 after post-mortem, that to me is very disturbing. So some of these things, I mean, murder's murder, but some of them are just so up close and personal. And just the fact you would do that over and over, I just don't know. I don't know how depraved mind could come up with that.
It's really terrifying to think about these young women and the last thing they're seeing, their last breaths, are in the presence of this maniac who has his hands or a cord or something strangling them.
And I got to assume he's enjoying it.
It's horrific.
So who knows, they may be seeing a smile or some kind of satisfaction on their murderer's face.
And he's a big man. I mean, he's 6 foot tall. He weighs about 180, 200 pounds. He's not a small guy.
No.
24-year-old Audrey Spain had been working at Taco Bell for 2 years. The young woman never missed work. She didn't show up for her shift at the fast food restaurant on June 23rd of 1993, and her manager was worried. He phoned but only got her answering machine. Because it was so unlike Audrey, he even drove by her apartment, seeing her car in the parking lot. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. That's when he called her sister, but was unable to reach her that day. It was the following day, June 24th, that Audrey failed to show up again. After repeating the same process, driving by her place, calling her sister, he was really worried. He gets in touch with the manager at the woman's apartment building. He pleads that someone go inside the apartment to check on Audrey. When the maintenance worker enters the woman's apartment through a sliding glass door, he makes a grisly discovery. Audrey was dead in her bedroom. Around her neck appeared to be a bra and a t-shirt tied together and knotted as if someone had used the items to strangle her. Part of the shirt was stuffed inside Audrey's mouth. She had small abrasions on her face, eyes, and knees. Her back and knees. Again, Charlotte police had little to go on. Audrey had been raped and strangled. No witnesses came forward, no suspicious persons hanging around the building. No one pieced together that Audrey and Shauna knew the same man, Henry Wallace.
You know, in the story, I want to give them a bit of a break. Part of me wants to say, hey, some of this seems random and stuff, but if you look at the entire case, the proximity of the murders, if you're a detective, you're going to learn where did they work, who did they know, where did they hang out, all these simple things about a person's life. And I really feel like it was kind of obvious after maybe the third victim.
Well, we'll get into some of that here in a minute, Dylan.
Right.
Now, at the same time, Charlotte police hadn't even realized they had a possible serial killer on their hands. Summer came and went with more crimes to investigate. The murders of these two women and the other missing woman remained unsolved. Valencia Jumper was a 21-year-old from Columbia, South Carolina, who was studying computer science at Johnson C. Smith University. She was the youngest of 5 children, close with her family. In order to pay rent and tuition, Valencia was not only a full-time college student, but she also worked 2 part-time jobs. She worked as a sales associate at Heck's department store and worked at the Food Lion on Central Avenue, very close to the Bojangles where Caroline Love had been employed. Valencia's sister, Vanessa Jumper, had met Henry Wallace when she was a student at Winthrop University. Vanessa had made friends with Yvonne, Henry's sister. Henry knew the Jumper family, so he knows them. They're like family friends.
Yeah, I think this is what kind of makes him stand out from other killers is his close association to his victims.
In 1990, he'd introduced himself to Valencia at Food Lion. On August 9th of 1993, Valencia had made plans to get together with her boyfriend, Zach Davis. It was after midnight when he arrived at her place. Smoke was billowing out of her apartment. 911 was called, and when the fire department arrived, they found a pot of beans burning on the stove with the burner had been left on. Inside the bedroom, Valencia's body was discovered. She was badly charred from the fire. The medical examiner ruled Valencia had died from thermal burns. It would not be until Wallace, or Henry, was apprehended that the medical examiner would take a second look at her death, determining she died from strangulation. Henry Wallace accompanied his sister Yvonne to Valencia's funeral and even sent her family condolences.
How disgusting.
By all outward appearances, Henry Wallace, he was like 6 foot tall. He weighed about 200 pounds. He was affable. He was smart enough. He had a very outgoing personality. And people said he smiled constantly. Like he just seemed like he was perpetually in a good mood. Police continued interviewing relatives and friends of the victims, but they were drawing blanks. Although the killings started appearing as maybe the handiwork of one killer who was working a 5-mile radius in East Charlotte, no one could pinpoint a suspect. However, the black community was not pleased. Someone was raping and murdering young women, and it seemed the Charlotte police was ignoring the problem. East Charlotte was an urban neighborhood filled with mostly black folks, and 31% of Charlotte's population at the time was African American. It was a busy area with modest houses, strip malls, fast food restaurants, and sidewalks. Many folks walked around, kids walked to school, women walked up and down the sidewalks window shopping. Many were outraged that the police couldn't match fingerprints or that this person was managing to slip past law enforcement time and time again. Even the news media wasn't reporting on the women's murders. Was racism at play? Many felt this was the case. However, the Charlotte Police Department claims that they were working day and night to solve this rash of murders, with patrol cars stopping anyone who looked suspicious in the area. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something to say?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, is it a full-on, Department of Racist Cops, and I don't think that's typically the case. I mean, maybe that's the case some places around the country and such, but I think a lot of times it's just, and it's easy to analyze it in hindsight. It really is, because it's got to be a tough job to be an investigator. But I think how many times have we told this story? The black community, black women, black children. It's like at first they're slow to, and it's not just in the black community, but it's happened over and over in the black community. At first they're slow to say there's any connection between the crimes, right? That's step one. And it's their reluctance for whatever reason. And then it's like, even after they establish there is possibly some type of pattern or something, it's like you don't have this full-on mobilization, it seems like, right, of resources, of the news, reporting, the newspapers. It's just this slow reaction to the situation.
Well, that's how folks felt. They were like, if this had been an affluent neighborhood, one of the affluent areas of Charlotte, and these were young white women being murdered, this would be all over not only local news, but national news.
That's true. And I think what's often missed in that discussion is what you just said, the affluence. Because I'm telling you, if there was some killer preying around some damn,
trailer parks,
rural area in Oklahoma or North Carolina or wherever in America, it would be, I'm not going to say it'd be exactly the same, but that you'd see a similar slow reaction, because it's almost like for one, it takes a minute to pick up on the pattern, and two, it's almost like they don't care after they do pick up on the pattern, right? I'm not saying it's always, race isn't the only motivator there. Affluence.
Do you think classism comes into play as
Classism.
well?
I think classism, honestly, in this country to this day is often the more deciding factor than race. I truly do. Because even when you say, oh, well, if it was that, pretty blonde hair, blue eyed, whatever girl in the island, or Elizabeth Smart or whatever, those girls are always from affluent families, right? You don't hear about the poor little girl who's found, somewhere stuffed behind a trailer or in the middle of fucking nowhere or in the ghetto or in housing projects, I think affluence is the true dividing line in this country. And I'm sure there's some people out there like, oh, I'm not good for saying that, but prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Wow.
Well, I think that
Damn.
classism and racism are both very closely tied in this country.
I think often
And
classism gets
swept under the
racism flag.
right.
And neither of them are okay. But see, the reason that classism isn't concentrated on, in my opinion, is because that reminds us of different races that the real issue is classism. But if they always lean into the racism element, it keeps us separated. Does that make sense? The underclass, the lower class, instead of saying, hey, I live in a trailer, they live in a housing project, but we have a lot of the same problems, right? Cops are overbearing.
Poor.
We're over-policed, right? No one takes us seriously. People look down on us. They judge us from our homes or the way we look or dress.
Poor white trash.
Right. And so poor people, poor ways. And honestly, I think that's why classism is always kind of swept to the side. Maybe I'm wrong.
They don't want us to raise up and unite.
99% versus the 1%, yo.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's raise up.
Eat the
Start a
rich.
revolution.
Eat them.
Yeah, fuck the rich. Off with their heads. Michelle Stinson was a 20-year-old mother of 2 boys. Michelle was taking college classes at Piedmont Central Community College, studying graphic design and working at Taco Bell. Henry worked with Michelle at Taco Bell, and she considered him a friend. Professors admired Stinson's determination as she was raising 2 boys while trying to do college and managing to make A's and B's in her courses, like desktop publishing and print management. It was on September 14th of 1993, 5 weeks after Valencia Jumper's murder, that Henry went to her Greer Heights apartment. He raped Michelle, then strangled and stabbed her. The following day, her friend James Mays stopped by the apartment for a visit. He knocked on the door, but it went unanswered. James could hear someone inside the apartment and determined it was her 2 little boys. He entered into the apartment, and that's when her 3-year-old son named Ernie ran up to him and said his mommy was sleeping on the floor.
Oh my God. I mean, how tragic is that?
This is so heartbreaking. Mays hurried over to the kitchen where he found Michelle lying in a pool of blood. A kitchen knife was protruding from her back. He called 911, but he tried to call, but that's when he found that the telephone had been ripped from the wall. He gathered the children, Ernie and Nishan, and went to get help. There was no sign of a struggle or forced entry into the apartment. Police determined it was not a burglary. Michelle's autopsy showed she had a wound to her upper left back below the shoulder blade, which caused a mortal wound to the heart and lungs. She had been raped. After she was dying or dead, Michelle had been strangled.
So even after she's been stabbed, right, and incapacitated, I'm going to assume he still went to that. I mean,
Still went to it,
he enjoys it.
which shows there's something about it that he likes.
Right. His intention before he even starts these encounters is, this is the end game. I'm going to do this.
And it's escalating.
Yes, it is. The violence is escalating.
It went from he was creeping around, hiding out, waiting for the victim to be alone. And now he's murdering a woman in her apartment in front of her 2 children.
Well, I mean, her kids had to, there's no telling what they heard or observed during the entire event, you know? And just being a little kid, you know, saying my mommy's sleeping, if that doesn't pull at your heartstrings, I don't know what will. But still, they're there for that entire trauma. I can assume it's not like they got a west wing of the house where something can happen and you're totally unaware of it.
Well, yeah, they live in an apartment.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know they're not.
I mean, it's a 2-3 bedroom apartment.
Yeah,
Even a
it's
nice one is still an apartment.
probably like, 800-900 square feet?
Yeah.
The rest of 1993 was quiet. Because of community pressure, the Charlotte police were ramping up patrols in the area. They still didn't know if these murders were the work of a serial killer or related in any way.
I don't know. I mean, this isn't happening all over the world, right? Am I mistaken in saying that this is in a certain area of the city for the most part?
It's in East Charlotte. It's, like I said, it's a 5-mile radius.
Yeah, see, their reluctance to realize that pattern or admit to it is what really pisses me off time and again with police departments.
Well, Dylan, the local police are not the only ones who get it wrong. The FBI gets it wrong as well, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. So can you hold your peace until we get to the end of the wedding?
Yeah, I'm going to clutch my nuts.
Okay, February 4th of 1994, Henry Wallace was arrested on some shoplifting charges, but police had no clue he was involved in the string of murders in East Charlotte. It was on Sunday, February 20th of 1994, Barbara Rippey, a family friend and babysitter, went to Vanessa Mack's apartment. The 25-year-old mother of a 7-year-old and a 4-month-old was working at Carolina's Medical Center. Barbara often babysat the 4-month-old, so she arrived at the usual time, maybe a little bit earlier than 6 a.m. to pick up. When Barbara arrived, she found the door slightly ajar. Barbara went inside the apartment, and when she called out, there was no response. That's when she noticed the 4-month-old infant was lying on the couch, which was odd. Vanessa normally would never leave this young child unattended. Barbara walked through the kitchen, she checked the bathroom, and glanced in the bedroom. That's when Barbara did a double take. It was truly her worst nightmare. Barbara realized that the wad of blankets was actually not bedding at all, but rather Vanessa. A partially dressed Vanessa was lying in a strange position across the bed. Something, maybe a pillowcase, was tied around her throat. Her feet were exposed, and her skin was like a dull gray color. Barbara immediately snatched up the baby and bolted to a neighbor's house, knocking like crazy, trying to get to a phone. The first officer on the scene recognized Vanessa Mack's murder matched those of other victims in Charlotte. Vanessa had met Henry Wallace through her sister, who was an employee at Taco Bell.
Connection.
A towel, along with a long-sleeve t-shirt, had been used to strangle the woman. She had bled from her ears, nose, and she had a bloody wound on the back of her head. She died from strangulation. The contents of her pocketbook were strewn all over the bed beside her. Later, investigators will uncover a piece of evidence. A photograph surfaces from an ATM security camera, and they can make out a male attempting to use her debit card.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like he's like, well, I'm gonna kill this person anyway, so I might as well rob them as well. It seems to be one of those, crimes of opportunity, if you will. But his willingness, I mean, all murderers are horrible, but I mean, to do it with these children in the home, it's like again, it's escalating in a way. Like he doesn't mind knowing that the person's dead. The caregiver of these children, no telling when they'll be found or when someone else will come by. And then here you have toddlers, it sounds like basically, in the one instance, and then a small baby.
He's going to keep turning it up, Dylan. During the second week of March 1994, Henry's murder spree really cranks up. There would be 3 more murders within 3 days between March 9th through the 11th. It was as if this once careful killer went berserk, unable to control his urges any longer, or maybe he just got cocky, figuring he would never get caught.
Well, he's gotten away with murder after murder, and he's escalated. I mean, this guy's textbook, honestly, on like the trajectory of a killer. He tried some things, figured out what he liked. That's the MO. He stuck with it, and then it's like now he's getting brazen. Because he's getting away with it, or his cooling off period's shrinking, obviously, and I'm not going to say he went to a Ted Bundy where he tried to stop himself and it built up, and then he just lost his total control. But I think honestly with this guy, it sounds like he's just brazen now. He thinks he can get away with it no matter what.
By this time, Charlotte police had reached out to the FBI for assistance. It was pretty clear to investigators that these murders had a link, yet they couldn't exactly figure it out. In some ways, there were recognizable signs that this had to be the same killer, yet in other ways, each murder had unique elements. The FBI actually didn't think the murders were the work of a serial killer, which was later, a serious error. But just based on their profile, they thought, well, this one victim has been stabbed. These have been strangled. I mean, even the FBI profilers were like, we don't really think this is a serial killer.
Well, I think if I'm looking at all these cases, okay, the leading MO is strangulation. And the FBI is human. They're not gods. They're not machines. So there can be human error there. But if I'm looking at all these cases and the leading MO is strangulation, and then I see this one where this woman's stabbed, but she's also strangled, right? And it's also these, he's creating these, he's not bringing the stuff with him. He's taking T-shirts, bras, panties, whatever, and creating, the weapon to strangle them there. These improvised garrots, as you said earlier. And I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see how you missed that. Do you? Honestly? I mean, we're not investigators. We're not profilers. But it's easy to Monday morning
that's the thing.
quarterback.
I think it's easy for us to be couch detectives now.
Yeah.
But when you're in the midst of this and they don't exactly line up and there are some details that seem very different, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can see where maybe they made a mistake.
Well, a lot of them worked in fast food. If I'm not mistaken, maybe multiple victims in the same apartment building. I think that's part of this story. But I don't get it.
Don't jump ahead, Dylan.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I knew I was going to step on your.
Thanks for the spoiler alert, you dickhead.
I was going to step on your story.
24-year-old Betty Susie Balcom was the assistant manager at Bojangles on Central Avenue in Charlotte. The responsible young woman failed to show up for her shift on March 9th. The manager, Jeffrey Ellis, was unsettled by this. His former employee, Caroline Love, had failed to show up for work and was missing. He had heard the stories and rumors circulating throughout East Charlotte about murdered black women. He attempted calling her home but got no answer. He nervously awaited, hoping that she would show up at some point during the shift with an explanation, like maybe she had an emergency, a flat tire, something like that. He phoned other co-workers and even her mother, but no one had spoken to Susie. The next day, she was again a no-show. Considering her pristine attendance record, 2 days missed just did not sit right with Ellis. He and a co-worker drove over to Susie's apartment. He knocked on the door, peered in the windows, but there was no sign of anyone in the unit. He returned to Bojangles and once again called Susie's mom. That's when he decided to file a missing persons report. He calls the Charlotte police. The responding officer was able to talk a maintenance worker at the apartment building into opening up Balcom's unit. Inside, the officer found the young woman lying face down on her bed, fully clothed, with a towel twisted around her neck in that garrote fashion. A medical examiner would determine that she had been dead roughly 24 hours. A towel and a pillowcase were wrapped around her neck, making strangulation the manner of death. She had abrasions on her right shoulder, her chest, abdomen, and forehead. The apartment had been plundered. Obvious wires on an entertainment system let officers know the assailant had likely stolen a television and a VCR. Also missing was Susie's aqua-colored Pulsar. It was gone from the parking lot. Do you remember the Pulsar? That little sports car?
No, I don't think so. When you say little sports car, I think Del Sol.
Yeah, well, it was I think it was a Nissan Pulsar, and it was almost kind of like the equivalent of maybe
Okay.
like the Del Sol or something. I just remember them like being a really cool car. Like back in the day, I was like, ooh, as a kid, I thought they were like a hot car.
Well, dude, if somebody took the hard top off the Del Sol and then it clipped in the trunk or whatever,
And I wanted one of those. So
that was the
bad.
coolest shit. But I must say, I had that rant about classism earlier, and I do stand by a lot of those points I made. But I must say, here we are again in a predominantly black neighborhoods where there's been enough murders that the neighborhood's aware of them. There's rumors abound.
And yet the news isn't reporting this at all.
Right, the news is not leading every night with it, but there's rumors abound to the point where if you don't show up, if you're a black woman in these circumstances, if you don't show up or you're late somewhere, people are worried about your well-being. You have bosses, supervisors, coworkers who, if my someone who works with me doesn't show up for 3 days, we don't necessarily go to their home and check on them, right? So, that just shows you the angst and the worry that is embedded in this community. That's how many black women have been killed. And still it's not plastered all over the world. Like, what year is this?
This is 94.
94. I didn't hear about this.
And you lived in that area.
And I lived in that area. And I've lived around near that, within 300 miles of that area my entire life, and I've never heard of this case until we brought it up in our true crime now. So hey, you can't. What can you say? Jesus.
Well, I think we all know that racism exists.
It exists.
Institutional racism, and we've seen it time and time again in true crime and in law enforcement.
And
I listened to a podcast earlier today, Dylan, about the Chicago Strangler. Have you heard of the Chicago Strangler? Because I'll admit, I had no fucking clue that this was a thing. 50, mostly black females, a few white women, a few other women, but mostly black women, 50 of them murdered in Chicago over the last 20 years.
No shit.
And you don't fucking hear a thing about it.
I just now heard about that.
Yeah, so don't tell me racism don't exist in this shit.
One of the Grim Sleeper.
Fucking Sam Little.
Sam Little.
Jesus Christ. That guy.
The Atlanta child murders.
Well, while officers were dispatched with be on the lookout for that Nissan Pulsar, detectives were checking local pawn shops for that stolen television. And while this is happening, another call comes in. There was another body, a woman found dead in her apartment. Vernice Lamar Woods was the boyfriend of 18-year-old Brandy Henderson. The pair lived together along with their 10-month-old son. March 9th, Brandy had gone to a doctor's appointment, leaving Vernice with their son. His friend Henry Wallace stopped by for a few minutes and told his buddy that he was going to leave town. Brandy and Vernice lived in the same apartment complex as Susie Balcom. Around 5 p.m. on the 9th, He departed the unit for work, leaving his girlfriend and young son. When Verness returned around midnight, he found the apartment ravaged. He first checked on his 10-month-old son in the bedroom and found the child with a pair of shorts wrapped around his neck and face.
Oh my God.
The baby was barely breathing and foaming at the mouth. He ran to help the child, removing the shorts. And that's when he saw Brandy. The young woman was lying face down on the bed. Woods turned her over, removed towels that were tied around her neck. She was blue in the face. He called 911 frantically, then proceeded to perform CPR until emergency services arrived. But Brandy was dead. Fortunately, their young son was transported to the hospital where he survived the attack. Doctors were concerned the child might have brain damage, but luckily he made a full recovery. So now Henry Wallace has escalated. I mean, what was the point of hurting this innocent baby? The child wasn't a witness. I think this speaks to his pure evil, psychopathic tendencies. He's just fucking sadistic.
Yeah, I mean, he's done so many of these. It's like he's got to change the elements to keep it fresh, if you will. Isn't that disgusting? What, this baby cannot identify you. You've already left multiple kids alive in your victims' homes. So yeah, I think this, just like you said, he keeps amping it up.
Detectives were really feeling pressure to solve this series of murders. During a meeting, homicide detectives began comparing notes they'd made over the course of the entire investigations, looking for any clue. These women didn't know one another and rarely crossed paths. They didn't socialize at the same places. They mostly never worked or went to school together. What was the common thread? When the investigators began going down the list of friends and acquaintances that each victim associated with, one name jumped off the lists: Henry Wallace. Of the victims, two women, Shauna Hawk and Audrey Spain, had been employed alongside Henry at Taco Bell, where he had been a manager. Valencia Jumper had known Henry's sister Yvonne. Michelle Stinson was a regular diner at Taco Bell and had many friendly conversations with Henry when she would pop in there. Vanessa Mack's sister had once dated Henry. Susie Balcom was friends with Henry's current girlfriend, Sadie McKnight, who had also been roommates with Caroline Love, the missing woman. Brandy Henderson was the girlfriend of Henry's friend. Verness Woods had even told police that Henry frequently visited Brandy while he was at work, would keep her company while he was at work.
Yeah, so here's the part where I'm just like, what the hell, guys? Because it seems like in the court, you can say we don't know if they're linked, blah, 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 rah, rah, rah. But if you're investigating each one of these cases, you're going to find out where they worked, who they knew, who they were associated with, boyfriends, girlfriends, or whatever. And it seems to me like Henry would have came up earlier, right? If multiple people who work at a damn Taco Bell or have worked at a Taco Bell end up dead and murdered and strangled, I might go to a fucking Taco Bell and look around.
Well, it seems like more than half these women worked on Central Avenue.
There you go.
And that's where they did their shopping.
Yeah.
They worked at the Food Lion. They worked at Bojangles. They worked at Taco Bell.
Yeah, it's either the Taco Bell or businesses directly, next or on the same street.
What seemed like an unsolvable puzzle was finally coming together. A light had suddenly shined, busting the case wide open. Henry's rap sheet was immediately pulled, and he had a criminal history, including a failure to appear on a recent larceny charge. On March 12th, Lovey Slaughter dropped by her daughter's apartment. 35-year-old Deborah Slaughter didn't answer the door, but Lovey assumed her daughter was at work. She used a key she had to enter the apartment. The door was unlocked, which kind of surprised her. As Lovey entered the apartment, she saw her daughter Deborah lying in a pool of blood on the floor. She was face up with a white sock stuffed into her mouth. 2 towels were tied around her neck. The woman had been raped, beaten, and stabbed 38 times. A violent death. Overkill. Plus, she had been strangled.
Yeah, at this point, he's I don't know. I don't even know what to call it, but he thinks he can do whatever he
He's on
wants.
a rampage.
He's on a rampage. He's done this so many times. He has to keep adding other elements to it to keep the excitement there for him, I believe.
By now, Susie's missing pulsar was discovered across town. Now, you got to remember, these last 3 murders have happened within basically a 3-day span, March 9th through the 11th. So by now, they found her car. The car was empty, but the perpetrator had left fingerprints on the trunk lid. It was conclusive the prints belonged to Henry Wallace. Police staked out Glen Hollow Apartments on Sharon Amity Road beginning March 11th when his name came into their in their investigation. They're like, we think we've got the guy here. I'm sorry, I'm being very inarticulate right now.
Way to go.
So they're able to tie him to these murder victims. Police approach Henry's girlfriend, Sadie McKnight, and she seemed shocked that her boyfriend was a suspect. But the more she spoke with officers, the more it made sense. Sadie McKnight told officers that Henry had recently given her multiple pieces of jewelry, these gifts, and some of them seemed familiar. Rings, necklaces, bracelets. That's when it dawned on her that these were stolen from the murdered women.
When did that dawn on her?
When she's talking to police.
Oh, okay.
I just said that.
Well, I was going
Thanks
to
for
say.
paying attention.
Well, I was paying attention, but I just it sounded like maybe it dawned on her before. So the cops are like asking her about her boyfriend, and
We think he murdered these women.
Yeah.
Has anything unusual been going on? That kind of thing. And that's when she starts bringing up, well, he's recently gifted me like a lot of jewelry.
out of nowhere,
Yeah.
unusual.
And
Okay.
so that's when it's like, well, holy fuck, does this jewelry belong to these murdered women? And it kind of like, she makes this connection.
Oh my God, could you imagine being her?
No.
And that you live day in and day out with this person?
And that your roommate is missing and your boyfriend's likely responsible.
That's crazy.
And your friend is dead at the hands of your boyfriend? I mean, you would have to feel so much guilt, even though it's not her fault. But if I were in her shoes, I would feel so guilty.
Yeah.
I brought this monster into the lives of these women.
Right. I mean, in a way, she would have a type of survivor's guilt.
Well, finally, detectives were able to track him down on March 12th at a friend's house. It was around 5 p.m. when the arrest was made. Henry was very cool and collected as he was placed in cuffs. He didn't put up a fight. During the initial interview, Henry alluded to the larceny charges. When they were like, do you know why you're here? He was like, oh, well, I skipped, out on my court date. However, over the course of a few hours, Henry finally confessed to killing 9 women in the Charlotte area. He also confessed to murdering a sex worker. He didn't know her name, but said that he had dumped her body somewhere near where he had left Caroline Love's body. He told officers, I feel like a burden has been lifted.
Oh, poor Henry.
In hours of confession tapes, Henry Wallace walked detectives through gory details of each murder. Though he had robbed most of his victims, he made it clear robbery was not the first motive. It was sex. He had fantasies about power and control. The robberies were merely a way to pay for his crack cocaine habit. He had trouble holding down steady work. Robbing became a way to earn easy money. Robbing the women became secondary. When a detective asked Henry if he thought maybe he was schizophrenic or had mental problems, Henry said no. He said, quote, there's only one Henry, the bad Henry.
Oh my God.
He admitted that initially he had no intentions of killing Shauna Hawk and had only stopped by to chat with her. They chatted for about an hour, and that's when Shauna began teasing him about a fight he had had with his girlfriend Sadie. He admitted that he killed her out of anger and then stole $50 from her purse. Audrey Spain had just returned from vacation when he popped by to visit her. He offered to share a joint with her. Henry told investigators that robbery had been his main reason for killing the woman. After she was dead, he stole her Visa MasterCard and an Exxon gas card, and he'd used the latter to buy gasoline. He said Valencia Jumper was like a little sister and offered no good reason for her murder. Henry had stopped by to talk to her about a fight he had had with his girlfriend. He then attacked the young woman, who begged for her life. She was fully cooperating with him sexually in hopes of saving her own life, but Henry killed her anyway. He robbed expensive pieces of jewelry from her, which he claims he pawned. His motive for killing Michelle Stinson had been sex. He was just itching to rape someone.
Yeah, I mean, he was even though the one victim you just said cooperated, he wants to kill you, but he wants to rape you first, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to change his mind.
By the time he murdered Vanessa Mack, his motive was money. He knew she had a good job, money in the bank, and always carried a debit card. Wallace needed to buy some crack. However, he says she did give him a fake PIN number for that debit card, and it really pissed him off.
Well, good. Fuck him.
He thought Susie Balcom might have keys to the safe at her fast food job because she was an assistant manager. Instead, he raped the woman and killed her. He had recently wrecked his Nissan Maxima, so that's why he stole her Pulsar. He stepped over after murdering Susie. He stepped over to Brandy Henderson's apartment knowing she was home alone. Because remember, earlier in the day, he had just visited her boyfriend knowing the guy went to work from 5 to midnight. She only had $15 cash in her purse. He demanded oral sex, admitting that the more she begged him to please stop and was pleading with him, he got really aroused.
Well, yeah, he's a monster.
When her son began to cry, he freaked out and tried to kill the child. But he said he actually wasn't trying to kill the child. He was just trying to quieten him down.
Is that the little baby with the stuff wrapped around his head?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know what? Fuck this fucking guy, dude. I don't want any of your explanations. None of it makes sense, and it doesn't make it any better.
Well, I'm just telling you what he told detectives.
No, I'm not. I'm not admonishing you, honey. It's just this dude.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll allow it.
He had asked Deborah Slaughter if she wanted to go in on purchasing some crack cocaine. She told him she didn't have enough money. In his disappointment, he attacked her and took $60 in cash. She began screaming at him, quote, "The rumors are true. You're the one strangling all the women in Charlotte."
Oh my God.
That's when he killed her. So at this point, someone has been saying that they think it's Henry.
Well, the community, the friends, family in all these areas, they know each other. I mean, there's such close proximity. People know, people talk, and they've already kind of they've been left to wonder who's doing this, right? And it doesn't surprise me at all that someone like Henry, people know people's going to know he does drugs and things like that, and people are going to be like, they're going to kind of make these connections, even if it's not official or they're not investigators. People aren't dumb, so yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all they thought that.
He kills Deborah, leaves her apartment, buys some cocaine, some crack, returns back to her apartment, stepping over her lifeless body, smokes the crack in her bathroom.
Disrespectful asshole.
Yeah. I mean, what the fuck? On April 9th of 1994, Henry Louis Wallace was indicted on 9 counts of murder, as well as a slew of other charges. His trial concluded on January 7th, 1997, when jurors found him guilty. He was sentenced to die on January 29th of 1998. Of 1997. When arrested, Wallace weighed around 180 pounds, but was nearing 400 pounds when he went to Raleigh's Central Prison.
Oh, wow.
You can see the obvious difference in his face from his mugshot until he's being taken away in handcuffs. Like, he became a big boy.
Well, starches are not agreeing with him.
Immediately, well, and I guess he's not smoking the crack, right? Immediately, inmates began drawing him into fights, and he had to be separated from other inmates in prison.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's such a at that point, it's such a big story, regional story. They're going to be like, yeah, I want to fuck that guy up.
Well, and you got to think about a lot of these inmates. I mean, they're married, they have sisters, mothers, wives, girlfriend. I mean, they're probably looking at him thinking, "You fucker."
Well, yeah, short of being a serial rapist or molester or murderer, which there's a lot of other reasons you can end up in jail. Most of these inmates, like you said, have moms, daughters, kids, wives, girlfriends they're missing, and they can't protect them. So they feel, and that way they feel inadequate. And then you bring this guy in here, and now we can do something about it.
In 1998, he married a nurse named Rebecca Torija. Wallace has filed several appeals, but judges have rejected all of them. In the aftermath, Wallace's mother and sister were inundated with phone calls. They didn't know he had a crack cocaine problem until he was arrested. He told his mother he felt relieved when arrested. His family was left dealing with the devastation as they had been friends with some of the victims. And I read an article in the Charlotte Observer where they were asking his mother, like, have you been to visit him in jail? And she was like, no, I'm really mad at him. I don't know when I'll be able to go see him.
Well, I don't blame her. Why is he alive?
Well, he's on death row.
That's such bullshit.
It's a slow process, Dylan.
It should not be that fucking slow.
Well, considering that he has lost every appeal that that he's filed, I imagine that, sometime maybe in the near future we should get an execution date on Henry.
I don't want to execute an innocent person, man or woman, obviously. I think that's the only reason to take a hard look at, the death penalty. But, I mean, when you know, right? Shouldn't that be a fast lane when it's obvious? Like if it's DNA or it's beyond a shadow of a doubt in multiple cases, I think there should be this one over here. This one for people who may be innocent or whatever. We got to make sure. And this fast lane for pieces of shit like Henry.
Well, and then there was the very first victim that we know of, Tashonda Bethia, in his hometown of Barnwell. And he was never officially charged with her murder, but admitted to it.
Well, I mean, there was a chance right there to save 9 other women.
I mean, yeah. And, investigators and, now that they know that he was a serial killer and that he was working in Charlotte have said, there could be plenty more victims out there they just don't know about. Because he did spend time on the West Coast. He was stationed in Washington State and, was kind of back and forth. So there could be other victims that they don't know about.
He killed 3 women in like as many days.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
2 in the same apartment building.
Who's to say that there's not just, 10, 20, 30, 40? Who knows?
Who the fuck? I mean, it's just crazy to me. You murder someone in their apartment, in their home, in their sanctuary. Then you walk across the hallway to another building or whatever in the same apartment building and you murder someone else in the same fucking day.
Yeah. Yeah, and the cops are still like, I don't know if it's connected. What the fuck, dude? I mean, come on, man.
Yeah. Like I said, this has been a wild story, and I'm so surprised that it has not been covered more as far as true crime cases.
What was his full name?
And that Henry Louis Wallace is not in like the top 10 serial killers out there.
Henry Louis Wallace. I'm sorry to anybody that has any or all those names, but that sounds like a serial killer name. Henry Louis Wallace. I mean, yeah. He had 9 victims we know of, possibly more. Just the brutality and the almost efficiency that he did it. And the fact that he didn't care if he knew them, that's one thing that does, again, strikes me as odd. That he
went out of his way to murder women he knew.
Right. He knew them to the point where he knew when they were vulnerable. He knew when they were alone. He knew when he could take advantage, kind of like act like a friend, gain entry into their home, and then, totally flip the script. So that's pretty brazen and disgusting.
And then the scoundrel has the fucking audacity to show up to funerals for these victims.
Well, I mean,
like in the Valencia jumper case.
There you go.
To accompany his sister to the funeral of her best friend's little sister, a family friend.
What kind of piece of shit could sit at a funeral and watch all that grief unfold in front of you, knowing that you caused it?
While playing this part? I don't understand.
A narcissistic monster, a sociopath, a full-blown psychopath.
I guess we'll never understand.
He's all that shit.
Yeah, so he's still in prison, and we'll find out what happens to him, I guess,
He's going to die of old age, bruh.
sometime down the road.
Some bullshit.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that this case was suggested to us by Caitlin. And yeah, it's a very interesting case. I'm glad we were able to cover it. I learned a lot more about it. I'd known the story, but I didn't know all of the details. So I was, through the research, was like, wow, it was surprising and it was really shocking.
Yeah, per usual, you took the deep dive on it, and I guess in a way helped us understand certainly the entire situation, and it just blows my mind.
Well, there is like a true crime documentary. I believe it is called Bad Henry. I did find some clips of that, but mostly I dug through newspaper archives to find this information. Charlotte Observer, big resource in this. Yeah, so. All right, Dylan, I'm tired. You're tired. I think it's about time to wrap this up.
Yeah, and I just want everyone out there to know I love you. I do. I truly do.
Yeah, you say that all the time.
Men and women.
People are getting tired of listening to your declarations
I don't believe that.
of affection.
And I just want you to know in these tumultuous times, just do what you can to be positive. You know what I mean? Reach out to someone near you or beside you and just try to support them if you have the mental health capacity to do that.
Maybe not physically reach out because you probably still want to maintain your 6 feet of social distance.
Unless they're in your pod.
Unless they're in your pod.
Yeah, but, just try to be a good person because we're in dark times. I'm not a religious person, but I don't know what the fuck's going on in the world.
I don't think any of us know what the fuck is going on.
I don't know if we're in a parallel universe or a Terran reality. Thanks, CERN particle accelerator coming forth on batshit crazy in the near future. We'll talk about that, but just try to do your best. Try to do your best to be a good human.
You can drop us a line, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. You can reach out on Instagram, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, if you're feeling froggy, there's always patreon.com/mountainmurderspodcast where you can access bonus content, get a link to our Discord chat. We have a lot of fun there, and listen to these episodes ad-free. It's a great bonus. No ads.
Ad-free is a big deal.
Okay. We'll be back on Wednesday, Dylan, with what kind of episode?
Mountain Murders Offbeat.
Yeah. You only needed minimal prompting to remember that it's called Offbeat. Awesome.
She was mouthing the words Mountain Murders Offbeat.
Dylan.
I knew that.
Okay.
It's our midweek humping.
It's our midweek mini. That's right. Okay, guys. Stay safe. As Dylan said, be kind to each other. And, yeah.
We'll see you again next week.
Peace out.